Welcome to Hope Matters Radio.
We're discussing, should we move or should we improve? And it really comes down to the fundamentals of what the experts help us evaluate. We have Chris Clark of Basement Waterproofing Specialist, and we have Kyle Adamczyk of K&M Home Enhancements with us today. Paul, as our co-host, where do we go? I mean, there's a lot of different facets and questions we can ask, aren't there?
Yeah, well, when we left off, we were talking to Chris a little bit about basement waterproofing, and the questions that I had were, what would you say are the leading causes of water infiltration, and what would you say are the key methods that you use to abate that?
The age of the foundation and the constant beating of water against the side of your foundation. Understand the masonry products and the products they use to seal the foundation when the house was originally built typically have a shelf life. So one thing, people actually start to realize is, they try to start to do the outside stuff, which is moving the gutters away. And, unfortunately, that's only going to move about 10% of the water that actually sits against the side of your foundation. It's kind of simple. Water followed its own direction underground before the property was, even the foundation was dug. So what you actually end up with is a false water table around the outside of the foundation in the uncompact soil area. So the way to fix a lot of these problems is simple. Interior pressure relief system is typically collecting the water at the interior part of the wall through a hydrostatic pressure relief pipe installed underneath the concrete floor, which goes to a sub pump, and then the water is ejected out of the house. Every house is built differently, so there are so many different variations of ways to physically remove the water from the house.
When we look at new construction, we really need to take into consideration that the builder wants to build for, in most instances, the least amount of cost. We may want to upgrade that system before the home's even constructed to avoid costly fixes or repairs down the line.
100% agree. One thing I've seen, and a reason why we're still in business and doing a lot of business, is a lot of the builders, they've been cutting corners, especially when the economy's down or the influx of subcontractors building developments. It's all about the almighty dollar. And when the builders are actually building these houses, they don't do their due diligence in the proper pressure relief system. So I've been seeing houses as early as 5 years old having problems with water already. So it's really who builds the house.
So Kyle, when you go out on a build and go to finish a basement, I would assume that probably one of the first things you're evaluating, if you're the first guy out on the job rather than Chris, is whether or not there are basement water issues. In your experience, have there been any particular vintage homes or style of foundations that are more problematic than others, or do you?
I find that the block foundations seem to give us a lot more trouble than the poured foundations, just because of their just stacked piece by piece instead of one monolithic pour.
That's kind of what you were saying earlier, Chris, with the effervescence.
Yeah, I live in a stone foundation. My foundation is 225 years old, and the house doesn't leak nearly as bad as some of the houses were built between the 50s and the 70s. It's just the nature of what they thought would work for technology didn't last the test of time. All different foundations leak in their different specific ways. A lot of times you'll get weep through the cinder block walls. Most concrete walls don't leak because they're, of course, an 8-inch or a 10-inch thick wall, but a lot of times you have the exterior pressure and the water seeps underneath the house and it starts to come up at the floor area. And it's typically because there are 3 separate concrete pours made when you actually pour the foundation. So the footer would be poured as a single pour of concrete first, then the walls would be poured second, and then of course the third would be the floor. The problem with that is a lot of the contractors put is what they call the bare minimal as far as what you have to do these days for building, and it's kind of subpar products. It's not done correctly because the people who are building the foundations are not waterproofers. Most of the time they're subcontracted concrete guys, and that doesn't really particularly work for people 10 years, 15 years down the road.
Kyle, when we look at what Chris is talking about, it's easy to go and quote somebody, say, $15,000 to finish their basement. It's easy to go in and quote somebody $40,000 depending on size and what they'd like to have done. How do you educate and work with your client to actually make the right decisions to make sure that their investment stands the challenges of time?
We work on a design build principle. So what that is I'll have a designer or an architect, depending on what we need, and myself will both meet with the client at the same time. So instead of having an architect or a designer come up with the plans first and then having the contractors bid on it, where they really don't know what they're getting or what the cost is going to be, we work together to come up with a design and a cost at the same time, so that the homeowner knows where they're going to be at the end of the day with their project and what they can afford and what they can't.
I think that's a terrific way to look at it, because conceptually you can do anything on paper. When it comes to the actual modern building techniques and application, it could be, one simple little thing could be a $10,000 or $20,000 add-on. Doing it a different way from the contractor position or construction elements could be $5. And it's silly to say, that extreme, but really that's what it comes down to.
I think they call that it's an engineer's dream, mechanic's nightmare.
Hope Matters Radio is brought to you by the Real Estate Radio Network. Visit hopemattersradio.com for more information. That's hopemattersradio.com.